Today we're gonna, so a couple things about this. This is gonna be our last one of the year. We were back and forth. We're gonna do another session in December. We decided based off of the holidays and based off of just general feedback that we've had in the last couple sessions that we want to take this time to kind of gather this information and actually kind of really bring it back to AZA to figure out, okay, what's going to happen with, all this great intel and all this great information and sharing, and we want to make this as powerful as possible. So basically, this will be the final one of the year. We're not just saying goodbye right now. We're just going to say goodbye, but see you soon type of thing if you're a Disney fan from there. And hopefully in the next, month or two after the holiday season, we can kind of regroup, like I said, with AZA and our members on this team here, and of course, information that you provided along the way that we can really make sound decisions on how to best move forward. Because we put a lot of effort, a lot of time, and everyone's intel and everyone's input has been absolutely just wonderful. And I think all of us still get the goosebumps from actually seeing that. So again, thank all of you for actually doing that. With that being said, though, I definitely want to make sure if you have any type of other feedback or recommendations or how these webinars went or anything else related to this, please, please, please reach out to us. We do want to take all this. This was meant to be a pilot program for us to really learn from each other, not for us to dictate towards you, but really use our community as a stronghold and move forward from there. So, this is our first dabble into it, but it's not our last one. So again, thank you all for really providing all this amazing information here. So anyone want to share anything right now about, your experiences so far? Anything that you may wish that we dabbled further into or less of? I think this is a really great time to actually share that. Again, not to put anyone on the spot, you can definitely email us outside there, but I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to kind of provide that if you feel that is necessary. Again, I'll bring all this back to our committee members from there, but I'll give the next couple minutes just to let us, let you chime in if you want to, and then we'll do our last topic of this session here. Let's see, crowd's going wild. All right, Paula at Toronto, what do you have to share with us?
I was just going to say that I have really enjoyed the sharing as well. And one of the things that I found really valuable is that I have had, if you will call it breakout sessions or other meetings with people from this committee kind of independently to hash out some other details that both of us were interested in. So I'm not sure if going forward, there's some way of, creating maybe if we have deliverables or steering committees or something to work towards a product in that sense. But these sort of side meetings that I've had are really highlighting that there's a lot of content to be put sort of down on paper or into some sort of a guide that I maybe, moving forward might be really helpful to disseminate to everyone.
That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. All right, now we broke the seal, so who else could chime in? All right, I don't know your first name, but Sheer.
Oh, sorry, it's Catherine. I'm new to this. I think I've only attended 2, but I'm really sad that I came late to the game because already we have actually adapted the AZA conservation culture questionnaire that was talked about at the last meeting, and we've got a draft going out to our conservation committee to send out to staff. So we're super excited that we've already learned so much from this team, even though we came in late. So I wanted to apologize that I'm being quiet, but it's only because I've been here twice.
Don't apologize. Great. You're still getting information and you're sharing things out there. That's amazing. So again, this is not the last of it. This is just going to say we're going to take a pause, regroup, and kind of figure out how to best move forward. And this is why I want to hear all your input and what was good, the bad, the ugly. Again, my name is Ben, if it's the ugly part of it, so. I'm kind of piling through here. Usually I have a Jeff to kind of look at this too, so I'm kind of making sure no other hands are being raised. You could also just unmute and just blurb if you like to. I'm looking at Susie. She feels like she wants to jump onto the screen and share.
I just wanted to say to reiterate what Catherine just said too, because Becca Haynes was representing Como Park Swimming Conservatory for a the duration for us. And she just took another job within the city, but no longer at the zoo. And so I kind of came into it late, and she gave me some of her notes and things, but I feel also like I just have been at 2, so I don't feel like I can participate. I mean, I don't feel I have a lot to contribute at this time.
No, it's fine. I'm glad. Again, it's great to see even at 2 meetings you found there's something great out of here. So that's awesome to hear. And that was kind of the goal. We wanted to make sure that everyone had that voice to really see and what's working. So thank you for sharing, for sure. I appreciate that. I also don't have a problem calling on people as well. So if you want to just, so you can raise your hand. If not, I'm just going to pick a name and say, hey, I feel like Eric, you've been so vocal in these sessions here. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are.
Well, I don't feel like I have anything else to say about, you know, or in addition to what's already been said. Having some sort of source, like a resource library, you know, would be really helpful. Being able to maintain the community, you know, all these things that have already been said, I think are great ideas.
Wonderful. Very good. I'll leave it up for 1 or 2 more times, and then we'll get on to our last session here. Again, if you don't have anything to say now, please just shoot us an email. I'll be happy to kind of take that into consideration as well. All righty. Well, thank you for those who shared their information there. I'm now going to just quickly share my screen for a second, just so we could see this here. So these are going to be the 2 questions we're going to be talking about today. Can everyone see my screen? Alrighty, so this is our kind of our topic. So what are the communications issues you face in culture building? So the first one, who drives your organization's culture initiatives? And the second one, we can dabble between both of them. How does your organization communicate culture to job candidates, employees, volunteers, and to the public? So I know we kind of dabbled in this in the past as well, but we just kind of want to see if anything has changed or if we're enlightened from the last few months, and kind of seeing where everyone stands now when it comes to this. Alrighty. All right, Rebecca, come on down. The price is right.
Hi, I don't know that I have anything super helpful to talk about here, but I will just say that we just finished a new strategic plan for our organization. And one part of that is to, we already had, of course, a mission and a vision and values, but we have rephrased all of our values. And so and one of the action items in the strategic plan is to be more proactive about developing our culture. So I would say in the past that our culture has been a little bit organically developed, and we have made it now part of the strategic plan to make sure that we are being mindful and developing the culture in the way that we as an organization feel like we want it to be, and not just letting it happen on its own.
Sure.
And I would
Can you elaborate on the mindfulness a little bit? How, you know, because I feel like everyone wants to be able to do this, but like, how do you actually like push it to the next level? Because it takes the the trickle effect a little bit there. So I would love to know what your plan of action or course of action may be.
Well, it's being developed now. I will say our VP of Organizational Development, who oversees the Human Resources Department, that person is kind of leading the charge on this. So a few things we've started with is just we've had some, sorry, that's my phone ringing. We have had some discussions in the senior team about what we think the culture is now and what we would like it to be. And we've discussed resources that are available about other organizations' cultures and what we like and what we don't like and things like that. But I would say we're still very much in the starting phases of developing this. But okay. Coming up with new values was important to that, and I like the direction that we've gone with those. So that's one concrete start that we've made now.
It's fantastic. Kind of follow up on that too for everyone. I think, values really plays a role in building a cultural element there outside of just conservation culture from there. So does anyone have been re-looking at their institutional values to kind of encompass kind of a conservation culture? I think it's everyone's kind of in the same boat in terms of trying to, look from a top-down model and figure out how to best, get everyone jazzed and everyone, for the cultural piece from there. So I'm kind of curious, anyone else has done things similar to what Rebecca might be doing through Oklahoma?
Well, I guess, Rebecca, I had a question. So you're talking about being intentional about the culture that you want to develop. And are you talking about specific facets like the conservation aspects of your culture, the safety aspects, or the animal well-being, or are you just talking about it more broadly as it relates to those values or something? Curious about the framing.
Sure. So it's specific and intentional around those values. So one of the values is people, and around that is trying to make sure that we're providing opportunities for staff to grow, obviously, and learn. The culture piece is one of the the conservation piece is one of the values specifically now that's called out. Our mission has changed a bit in that our goal now is to inspire conservation action, which is pretty bold mission, I think. So we are definitely, we've already worked towards this, but trying to work harder towards helping every person in the institution understand that their job does have something to do with conservation, right? We're a conservation organization, so trying to reinforce for staff, whether you work with the animals or not, or you work in the actual conservation and science department, doesn't matter. Like, we're all working towards conservation and inspiring conservation action, among our guests and things like that. So we are on a journey. We're at the beginning of the journey. So, we've got a long ways to go.
Great. We love journeys here, don't we? Welcome to the zoo world. Journeys everywhere.
This is Linda from Akron, and we're kind of in the same situation. Unknown caller. Sorry. Where we finished our strategic plan and had it approved by the board in July, and there's a big conservation component in that. And so right now we're finalizing our conservation strategic plan along with our education strategic plan, and they dovetail very nicely together. At the end of the month, we'll be going in front of the board to have those approved, but it's the same kind of thing that Rebecca was talking about in regards to framing it through strategic planning, and then figuring out now, as we're nearing the final approval, how are we going to start implementing and communicating that? And I think it's what I call the small drop technique of, there has to be something there communicated in small drips, but consistently. And so we're still kind of framing how we're going to go about that communication plan, but the idea of kind of, you talk about it, and the more you talk about it, the more buy-in you get, and the more it becomes part of your culture and part of what you do on a day-to-day basis, or what everyone thinks about on a day-to-day basis. So I think that the strategy for communicating it, in looking at the questions that Jeremy has on the screen, is that kind of small drip. And I'm sure there's some fancier title for it, but that's how I like to view it, is just the consistency of the message and that the repetition of the message.
Hey, Linda, have you noticed the public perception of conservation has changed with your kind of new framework in mind? I know it's kind of early still, but I'm just kind of curious if through either signage or the repetition, I just love to know how the public is viewing that, if they even notice the change yet.
Actually, it's interesting because we've been doing some DEI work, and one of the things that we talked with some focus groups in the community in relationship to DEI was also how they view us in regards to conservation and education. And the results of that were very interesting in that people do see us as a conservation leader in our area, and that's an expectation they have of us. So I think the more, you know, as we firm up how we're going to frame it and how we're going to communicate it, I think it's going to be even more impactful to the community, and their view of us will grow in that capacity. And our plan is to help engage them in many of our efforts that we're moving forward with. So some of the reasons we picked some of our, what we call flagship projects, focuses, is because they have a great community engagement component to them.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I'd love to see that continuing. So great job. Did anyone else want to share about the same question about, has anyone shifted kind of their, their own internal conservation culture? Has it trickled out to the public? And if you notice any differences, especially within your communities, that they have not been really engaged in conservation or knowledge about conservation?
Jeremy, I can jump in just to speak to a little bit of this. Very similar to what was just being talked about with just some of the projects and flagship projects with some of the species. We at the Toronto Zoo have an Endangered Species Reserve Fund, funding that we provide to different organizations to support their conservation efforts, the research. And one of the big pieces that the projects now focus on is that community piece. So community, in the community where that project's taking place, whether it's in Madagascar or wherever that might be. But with that, in regards to our own community, I feel like we're trying hard to really show that we're having that conservation impact. I think we still struggle with getting the messaging out there, but we do have all the different annual kind of surveys that we take from the visitors to see what are they learning. Are we creating that behavioral, the change? Just again, building, I guess, the advocates, right, in the community, because again, the next generation is going to be the ones advocating for conservation and science in general, right? So again, I don't know if we've figured out exactly all the, the best ways of doing it, but we are, like everyone else, is trying our hardest to try to find out if we are reaching the community the best way that we can.
Certainly, like I mentioned before, this is very much a journey. I think, we're shifting toward this, and, it all depends on institutional values and sizes and budgets and all the things we've talked about in the last several months here. And it can be simple as, someone at your front gate, talking about conservation, or it's a signage that, 3% of the population reads, it's trying to get some of these things out there. So I'm excited that, everyone's on that same journey to get to that place. So thank you for sharing. Anyone else would like to share anything about either the two questions we have on the board here, or something that we may have discussed before, or things that have worked and maybe not worked so far? It's a quiet group today.
Jeremy, I would say, with respect to the questions, this is something that I think we've struggled with internally, because I've been really jealous listening to a lot of you speak, and a lot of the people that are here representing really dynamic HR departments. And not to disparage our own department, but we don't have the same type of capacity, I would say. And when it's not HR, who does it? We have a our executive team is keeping these things in mind, and in the framing of our we're at the end of our existing strategic plan and working on framing the next one. But we also have our field conservation department, which has an outreach coordinator, which ostensibly was for the outward looking communities, but it's really been turned inward to try to enhance our own conservation culture internally. Identifying who is responsible for that sort of thing And then having the resources and the time and capability to do it is quite another thing.
I agree. I know everyone is in the same light that everyone's responsible, but again, it does fall to either a person or a team that has to kind of lead this in some capacity. And yeah, it's right. And I think everyone's structure within their own institutions are very different. You know, in agreement with you, Eric, you know, we have a very small HR team. It's a one-person dynamic in my small zoo here. So this stuff here falls under my jurisdiction, education. So it just, you know, and you have to have the want and need to keep it going there, because, you know, we're all busy, we all have things to do from there, and it's tough. So I think those sentiments, you know, definitely come across the entire board, whether you have big teams or small teams. You know, we have a lot of things coming at us all over the time, and just where that priority piece lies from there. And I think that's what we're trying to find, like, where is this something we want to really, you know, take a chunk out of and actually continue to grow, because is this something that we are moving forward with? So I feel you, I do, and I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm sure everyone else has some of those growing pains as well. So
I think whether you're working now on a strategic plan that identifies culture as a priority, or even if you don't, but you've identified it, you know, for yourselves as an important aspect, appealing to your executive team and CEOs and directors to make sure that there's actually somebody assigned for the responsibility of doing those things, which sometimes gets overlooked even in the writing of a strategic plan. You know, who's actually responsible for that?
it's tough, because that sometimes might lead to creating new positions, which are something very much not easy to do within a lot of our institutions. So I get it, but it's true. I think it's important, though, at least I think for strategy and for teacher planning, you know, I hope that all of us start, you know, having these conversations, and can at least have some input of the culture. So I think that is something that really is permeating throughout not only the zoo community, but just in general, the workforce. It's important to have that. So again, thank you, Eric, for sharing some of those insights. Shelley?
I very much appreciate those comments, and I wonder, had people intentionally, is this an evolution where we're seeing culture pulled out specifically in strategic plans? It sounded, Akron and Oklahoma, it sounded like this may be new, sort of a new foray to intentionally include culture. And I'm curious, are there examples of organizations that historically have always had culture within their strategic plan, or is this a new space for most?
So sorry for being late, all, but I would say, Shelley, in answer to your question, I think culture is often part of but from the perspective of a culture of productivity, a culture of professionalism, a culture of, you know, drive for results, but not a culture that's necessarily aligned with the sort of well-being of employees, and more aligned with the success and character of the organization.
That makes sense. Thank you, Jim. Anyone else want to share that? And looking at you, Laura, too. I know you're kind of fairly new to this role here, and I'm just kind of curious how that's being introduced.
Yeah, so we're also pretty kind of early in this journey. I don't think it's a part of our strategic plan. We actually, with the education manager here, we're starting a study trying to actually look at how our community sees the zoo as both a member of the community and conservation as a part of that. So we actually have a call out now to try to start some focus groups this winter before doing a bigger survey in the spring, to hopefully answer some of these questions for us and see how the community currently sees us, so that we can focus on moving forward more strategically. And, you know, how our local community views conservation and its importance, you know, here in Arkansas, as well as maybe the importance internationally. So it's nice hearing from all of you at different stages of this journey, because we're going to be getting there at some point. And I really like the idea of including conservation culture specifically in the overall strategic plan at some point.
Ooh, awesome. I look forward to seeing how that goes. Thank you. All right. Man, for a bunch of people who are excited about it, I'm trying to find someone else. I mean, there's Corinne, or I maybe find my big fan Susie again, Becky. So I call out people everywhere.
Yeah, I was thinking, there are a lot of things that have always been part of the essence of the organization, but they were not spelled out specifically sometimes in the strategic plan. But in the past 3 years or so, it seems that there's a lot of focuses that all organizations have seemingly spent some energy and time on. And, you know, culture of conservation is one, and DEI is another big focus. And I believe that going forward, those two items will be included to some extent in those strategic plan, because it's really what I believe the community as well as our employees are looking for. That's really a want, that's a need. And so I think that's why we're having special focuses on those specifically. And in terms of the community, the way we are successful in attracting them and having them discuss conservation issues is really through social gatherings, especially. I know, like, next week we're having a cocktail in conservation, for instance. And this is how we really have a big draw of people from the community. Of course, it's not the community at large. It's, you know, people who are in the know and who are connected. But as we roll those events out, and they become more and more successful, I think we'll find ways to have it trickle down in some fashion. In terms of education programs, we're increasing the ways and the medium as we've never done it before. So I think that's something that many organizations are tackling right now. And I'm not surprised that it's a recurring topic in our conversations.
Great, thank you for sharing. I guess anyone who has started bringing up conservation culture within their organizations, have you had anyone of interest, you know, any groups of interest trying to learn more about it? I'm just kind of curious, you know, if people know about what it might mean, conservation culture, and I'm just kind of curious to see what the voices of the, you know, the zoos and aquariums might be once it's being talked about.
Elaine Alberts, Georgia Aquarium. We are I'd say pretty early on still. I joined these meetings, I think, in August. But what we've done moving forward is, so I am the chair of our task force. And so we started with an all staff. So we had an all staff meeting where I talked to everybody about what is conservation culture, how are we defining it? And right now we're in the process of, we've had an open application period. So the next few weeks, our applications will close, and we'll have probably about 5 to 10 people joining us, joining the task force to bring conservation initiatives and sustainability initiatives to everybody in the building. But very, very early in the process. And I'm not sure, we have a culture person at the aquarium, and her name's Angie. I'm not sure if she's on the call or not, but she could also probably provide some great insight if she is here.
Are you here, Angie?
I am here.
Woo!
I was en route, so I was dark for a while, sorry. Yeah, they brought me on a year. I've worked at Georgia Aquarium a long time, and then I shifted from my role in support of our productions into the manager of culture and engagement. And so then our HR department brought a bunch of us to these meetings, and then from these meetings, they've created a task force, which now Elaine is chairing. And it will mimic our employee engagement task force in some ways. So it'll keep its roots to our staff. But I think,
you know, we are in the very early stages. We've been doing some siloed efforts, and it hasn't been communicated, and it's shifted over the years often as passion projects. So I think we're working on what was in our like second or third meeting of like pulling all of our things together. And so to answer your original questions of what would be valuable going forward, I would really love to see like a repeat, because we only connected with the things where we knew where we were and were attainable. And now that we've made some progress, it would be great to be able to see the next level and what we could strive for and what people have attempted and gain further insight again, now that we're in a new space.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you both, Elaine and Angie. Anyone else want to answer that question about?
I'm not necessarily going to answer, but I do want to say that we're in the beginning process. We're about a third done with our campus-wide, it's got a long name, but it basically campus-wide empathetic strategic plan for the campus. And a lot of this is, again, you know, moving through it and just trying to figure out next steps and things. But along the lines of Georgia Aquarium, I do believe that moving forward with this team, it seems like a lot of us are mid-process. So if we're all in it together, learning how we're doing and different, you know, important steps along the way, what's working, what's not working, and continuing, because it's like everybody started, it sounds like, and then they got the ball rolling, and now we're like in the infancy stage or the toddler stage, and it'd be nice to grow along in this community and just as a group, keeping in touch.
That makes sense, Susie. Susie, you're doing great. Everyone's doing great. So, all right. Anyone else want to share? Oh, Paula, you're back.
I was just going to give just a really quick, one of the things that we find challenging, and that I'm sure every institution finds challenging, every zoo and aquarium finds challenging, is that we have so many different specializations here that we don't all come together in one place very often or frequently. We have town halls, but you know, we don't all meet, and we're not all working in the same building. We all kind of come from different areas when we come in. I will say that a lot of the people that come into the area that I work in, because I'm in science, already come in with a tremendous amount of conservation knowledge and excitement around that. And we've had that historically as well, that these types of jobs tend to really attract people that are interested in that. What our issue has been in the last few years, now that we're building the science team and the incorporating, of course, it's all based around conservation, has been trying to harness that and hone it and focus it into certain things. So what I'm hearing from a lot of people that are just starting their journey is that they're making intentional directed choices of what things to focus on, which is going to be really critical, because what we're finding is it's trying to pull everybody's interests in together, listen and understand them and try to represent them, but at the same time we can't do everything, so try to focus everything in into directives so we can actually make impacts in conservation, not just have the culture, but actually make impactful contributions. And then on another note about the organizational communication, as I was saying, we've got so many different hubs and so many different specializations here. We actually have a science communicator. She does science communication researcher as part. She's also just recently switched over to a business partner, so she's a little bit split with her job, but she does still do that part. And what she's been doing to help us build our Live Your Best AZA, life, she's been actually going to each of the areas and giving them a talk, and telling them about, the AZA culture and living a culture of conservation and that kind of stuff. So it's not just necessarily one directed message in a town hall, but she's having more intimate conversations with each of the places, which allows them all to give feedback as well.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. All right. Any last minute calls on that particular thing? I have another slide that kind of pertains to my last questions about things. So last minute, anything else about internal communication or sharing things with, you know, your community? Alrighty, so we're gonna switch slightly. Can you see this next slide here? Kind of like evaluation of how the last, you know, almost year went from there. You know, these are just 3 basic ones to help guide these last minute questions here. And again, you can still communicate with us outside of these webinars here, but any insights that you have from these webinars, any other tools that you picked up from either us or the fellow members of this webinar session here? And again, what would be helpful in the future? We kind of dabble a little bit to the helpful in the future, but we really want to make sure we have all the right information so we can really push this to the next level. I think all of us are itching for that next level. So these are 3 things that we would love information on so we can really make that informed decision collectively within our group and with AZA. All right, Chris.
Hey, Jeremy. Afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to say that I know for our for the Akron Zoo, these have been really good for our leadership and for staff to be participating in, to hear the different stories or tools and approaches that are happening around the country. I know that, you know, as we're going through our conservation strategic planning, we're getting ready to share that with our board. It sets a great context. And we were fortunate that Jeremy was able to join us for one of those sessions and give the overall picture where AZA is headed. And in this space, the process that's being used. I think it's really going to be something to augment some of our current strategies, but also to take a fresh look, because we have found through the initial inventory of programs that some of what we thought had been sort of baked into how we make decisions and how we approach developing culture had been sort of taking a back seat to some of the most pressing issues. And now we're realizing, oh boy, without being intentional about this, we can be making investments and build in staff, et cetera, that are not necessarily in that straight line to what's really at the heart of our mission, right? The conservation. So I just think that these have been very useful. I don't have a specific tool per se, but I know that having this space for every month has been a great touchstone, and I can see us rejuvenating our approaches here in Akron.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing. Not all at once. Oh, Catherine. Oh, you changed your name.
Yeah, so people could rather call me C. You can call me C as well. We're like most, we're at the beginning. I talked about the survey that we modified based on the AZA materials we received from these workshops, which I found very valuable. We're setting up our baseline, and of course we want to create a conservation culture. But where I'm interested in is, how do we measure if we're actually achieving that? And so the AZA had an excellent panel series on monitoring and evaluation at the conference. And it was an excellent talk. I'd recommend everybody go and have a look at it if the video recordings are still up, because it is really linked to that strategic plan. And it's really linked to how are we showing that our conservation, because the reason why I think we all want to create a conservation culture is to actually get more conservation, achievements. But yeah, so thinking now next steps, okay, if I've got my baseline, how am I going to measure it most effectively and show that our conservation culture is making our conservation efforts that much better? Wonderful. So evaluation tools, I think, is the next step.
I like it. Thank you. You don't have to go away, black screens.
I'll chime in. I found really valuable the tangible items that people shared about what their organizations are doing. What stuck with me was the wildflower balls that one of the organizations had building that their staff could build, and then, or not the staff, that the guests could build and take out and be an active part of it. And also the organization that had highlighted animals and had conservation facts on each of the animals. I really loved how that highlighted the animals and it engaged the staff, and then it was communicated out to the guests. I thought that really tied it all together. But those still all land in a place that we're not there. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm hoping in the future we can revisit.
If we must. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Also, a reminder, like, we do have our network, all of you can be on there. So if you have stories or things like that, please share that on there as well. Again, I know these are great to have in-person things, to kind of virtually, but in person to kind of share these stories here. But we do have that network available to really start putting that library together so we can kind of use it as reference points. So that's where all these recordings go to, and this is for us to really build off of and utilize. And I know it's always tough because not everyone likes to use a network, but that's a good place for us to at least have a common ground to begin with. So, all right, who have I not heard from? I know, Sarah, you're usually pretty vocal too from Seattle, so I just want to figure out, do you need to share anything?
Hey, I don't mean to be quiet. No, Jim and I were talking about this earlier because we are, I think the recognition that has been just really valuable is this idea that there is kind of a continuum, and it's not linear, it's not a straight line, but a spectrum of sort of experience, and we're many of us are just in really different places on this continuum, and it makes me think about just the value of kind of peer-to-peer learning. And I love the network as a platform that kind of feels ready and waiting to share tools and resources. And it's interesting just because if we were to think of this as like a community of practice, we're in really different places. And that doesn't mean that anyone is in there's no superiority. Like I didn't create the culture of conservation. Part of it is regional and cultural, like it to kind of where we're located and different kinds of things. I think the big takeaway for me is just the inextricability. I think, like, we can't isolate this notion of a culture of conservation distinct and completely discrete from an inclusive culture that honors people in place, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. We heard a presentation from our vet, Dr. Caitlin Hatfield, this morning at the Seattle Aquarium, talking about this culture of animal well-being and the need to continue to describe and share the work that we do just to help our animals in our care thrive. And I feel like all of these are so intersectional. So that's neither here nor there, but this has definitely been food for thought.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Sorry to call upon you, but I know you always have a lot of great insight, so I really always appreciate that. All righty, if no one else has anything else to say, I don't think we need to stay on for the full entire hour. I know everyone likes to have extra time, but last call though. Anyone else want to share anything? All right, I don't think so, but again, thank you all for participating. This has been truly valuable, and it's great to see everyone's journey, and it's just, we're all doing this for the same and the right reasons here. So again, this is not a goodbye, this is a see you soon, but really for all of you, hope you enjoy the holiday season. I know it's very busy for all of us with lights and parties and things like that. So again, thank you for taking the time to share an hour with us each month. We're really excited to see where this goes, and we definitely will be in contact soon. You provided a lot of great information, and again, a round of applause for all of you for doing some great work across the board there. So thank you very much, and we'll be talking very soon. So have a wonderful rest of your day.